Where we're at in the session right now is what's called turnaround. And if you remember, Schoolhouse Rock a million years ago, like I'm just a bill, bills originate in either the House or the Senate, and they get heard in a committee, they get discussed, they get amended and, kind of worked until they're ready for prime time. And then they go to the floor of the House or the Senate, wherever they started, and we debate them, and they either pass or fail. And then we hand all the stuff from the House over to the Senate, and the Senate hands all the stuff that they've passed over to the House, and then we go through the whole process over again. And there are some bills that don't go exactly like that, but way more than in D.C., we try to follow the process so that every bill the public has plenty of time to talk to us about. We have plenty of time to come back here, talk to you about, and see what you think about it. And then we can go through the committee process, and if there are changes. Lee, if you need to grab a chair, please help yourself. Sorry about that. Catastrophic success. I had more people than I had chairs. I appreciate it. So the first thing I want to talk about right up front is what am I doing for Leavenworth? Because at the end of the day, that's why you sent me there. You didn't send me there to do stuff for rural Kansas or here or there. You sent me there to represent you. And if I can leave you with anything, what I'd tell you is all the best ideas that I've had, that I've been able to work on since I've been your representative in Topeka, are ideas that y'all brought to me. And I'm going to give you an example. It's a small example, but I think it's really important. So I don't know where y'all get your hair cut, but I get my hair cut by Frank Haddock. He's a block from my house, right? So I just walk out my front door, I go a block down the road, and I get my hair cut. And right next to Frank's haircut place, there's a new tattoo shop. It's called the Bearded Lady Tattoo Shop, right? And one day last year, I was walking out of Frank's, and I was in my car with my big campaign signs on it because it was an election year. And the owner, Diane Allen, she was sitting out front. She said, "Hey, are you Pat Proctor?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "Let me talk to you for a second." And what she said was she wanted to do a tattoo convention in Leavenworth. And I'm like, okay, I don't know anything about tattoos. I don't have a tattoo. But she piqued my interest because she said convention. Conventions, people have to stay in a hotel, people have to eat in our restaurants, people have to shop in our downtown because they're in our town for however long the convention lasts. And so she started talking to me and she said, "Hey, in Kansas, we can't bring in guest tattoo artists because there's no mechanism for it. If you're not licensed in the state of Kansas, you can't do tattoos in the state of Kansas. And what we'd like you to do is I'd like you to get us the ability to do these guest permits in Kansas." But like I said, business is business. And when I was running to serve you, I said, I want to bring jobs and opportunity back to Leavenworth. And, that sounds like opportunity that, you get more business in town. We have to hire more people. We get more people back to work. And so I worked with the Board of Cosmetology to figure out, was this true? What do we have in the law now? And it turns out that they had been trying to do this for years. They just didn't have a legislator who was interested enough to come talk to them about it. And so we worked on some legislation after I was reelected. We worked on some legislation throughout November and December. And when I got to Topeka, I introduced it. And I got a hearing right away. I got it to the floor of the House right away. I got it passed right away. So it's one of the bills that's in the pipeline that we're sending over the Senate this week. And I'm going to have to go through the whole process again. I'm going to have to go through a Senate committee hearing, going to have to go through the Senate with it. But I use that as an example of what I'm saying, which is if you've got something that you need worked on, get a hold of me. Another example is the Historic Kansas Act. Last year, Ken Bateman, who does some development downtown, he's got a building a few blocks from our building that someday will be a noodle shop. And he came to me about how difficult it is to use the current historic tax credit program. And we sat down and we nugged through it. We brought in Jeremy Greenmeyer, a couple other people, and we kind of nugged through what we need to fix. And we came out with this streamlined program where you could, you didn't have to go through all the historic paperwork and all the stuff, because if you got a small project, the tax credit you would get from the current program was not as big as the legal bill you're going to pay to file all the paperwork to get it done. And so, we drafted that legislation. We also added some stuff about fire suppression systems for upstairs lofts. We added some stuff about encouraging banks to loan to loan to these historic projects, and we got it through and it got passed into law. What I'm doing with it now, and actually, it's already been used in Leavenworth. Wolcott Brewing just applied and got approved for their tax credits from last year. So, that old Club Venom is now a building that's back in use, Wolcott Brewing, and it's doing really well from what I can tell. But we got to do more of that, right? And so this year, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the cap taken off of it, because in order to get it passed, fiscal, kind of the fiscal hawks wanted us to do it as sort of a pilot with a cap on it. Well, it's working, so let's take the cap off so that we can unleash it. Because what's happened is, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but what's happened is the Department of Revenue is using the cap to make it hard to get, because the Department of Revenue doesn't like to give tax credits. They like to get taxes. That's their function in life. And so they're trying, what they did was they made a really narrow window at the end of the year when you had to apply, and they didn't publicize it. So if you weren't watching the website every day, which by the way I was, if you weren't watching the website every day, you didn't know to apply. And so if we get the $10 million cap taken off of it, hopefully it'll open it up so people can apply for it all year. And so I've got a bill in the pipeline right now. It is, because it's in the tax committee, it didn't have to be done by turnaround. It's kind of wonky, but tax can keep working on bills throughout the session. So I'm hoping to get a hearing on it soon and get it through. Another thing somebody came to me with was property tax relief for disabled veterans. We have a program right now. It's this homestead tax exemption for people who are over 65 or disabled veterans. And but the salary or the income maximum that you can make in order to qualify for it is $50,000. And so very few disabled veterans qualify for it. And same with seniors, frankly, very few qualify for it. We did last year get the maximum house price that could be exempted raised from $150,000 to $350,000, and we did get that maximum income level keyed to inflation, so it will go up with inflation. But the costs go up with inflation, salaries go up with inflation, your benefits that are COLA adjusted go up with inflation, so you're probably never going to, that maximum income limit's never going to catch up with you. So what we needed was a different property tax relief system for disabled veterans. And so some folks came to me with this idea of not tying it to income, not tying it to house value price, but tying it to your level of disability. And so I filed a bill this year that is basically a graduated property tax relief for disabled veterans. If you're 30% disabled, you get a 70% exemption. If you're 70% or more, you get a 100% exemption. Also, if you're 65 or older and disabled at all, 100% exemption. Your surviving spouse, if you ever qualified for the exemption, they'll also get the same exemption. So that's the bill. We've gotten it through the tax committee. We had a bunch of veterans show up on the 20th of February, and thank you to anybody who, I don't see anybody in the room who's here, but a bunch of folks from Leavenworth came too and advocated for this bill. And it's, like I said, it's gotten out of the tax committee. It's in the pipeline, and because tax isn't limited by the turnaround, they tried to get all the bills that they had to get done by turnaround done. So I'm thinking in the next couple weeks we're going to be able to get it across the floor of the House. Yeah, Amanda.
So you said there's not going to be an income?
There's no income limit to it. There's no house value price to it. It's just however disabled you are. And I talked about this in my last town hall, but I want to hit on this. I haven't forgotten about everybody else, okay? I'm trying to chip away at this. Now that I've got the structure, there's really no reason that I can't amend the bill after we get it passed and just make it everybody 65 and older, right? And now I've already got, like I said, the structure for the bill. It's easier to amend it after it's passed than it is to kind of go for the whole enchilada. I understand it's frustrating, right? You see, like, this group's getting taken care of, this group isn't getting taken care of. But I kind of compare it to the camel the camel getting its nose under the tent. Once camel's nose under the tent, all it's got to do is push a little and you got a camel in your tent, right? And that's kind of how things work with getting legislation passed in Topeka. With this Historic Kansas Act, the Historic Kansas Act, I could only get a $10 million per year tax exemption. Well, now I've got the bill. All I got to do is go back and amend one line and strike it out, and now it's for everybody, as many people as want to apply. And so I know it's frustrating. It's frustrating for me because I'm the one that's up there going from office to office, talking to all my colleagues, trying to talk them into voting for these things to get them done for Leavenworth. But we are making progress. And so just bear with me. I'm getting it done. Thank you. Thank you. I do want to talk about the direction I want to go because I want to leave plenty of time because I want to talk a little bit about elections because I'm the chair of the elections committee. But before I leave, I want to talk about where I want to go with the taxes. In the Senate, this turnaround week, they passed a bill that I've been screaming for ever since we started talking about food tax, to accelerate the food tax exemption, sales food tax exemption. It's going to go to zero in 2024 instead of, I think it was 2026. And I took a lot of grief during the election because why did you vote for it to be graduated out to 2026? Well, I wanted it to go to zero immediately, but that's not the bill we had in front of us. And I know there was some meme going around on Facebook. These are the legislators that voted for not to go to zero sales tax. And my name's on along with everybody else. We were never given a bill that said go to sales, drop the sales tax to zero immediately. Because we had that bill put in front of us, I would have voted for it. If somebody got it from their desk, I would have voted for it twice. I mean, that's what I wanted, was to go to zero sales tax. It's the most regressive tax there is, right? Because the poorer you are, the greater percentage of your income is spent on food. So we got to get rid of that tax. It hurts the people in my neighborhood worst. I mean, I got a lot of folks that are living below, at or near the poverty line. I got a lot of folks that are barely making it. So I wanted it gone as much as anybody. The vote that we were actually given to vote on was, do you want to bring a bill to the floor that has not been through committee, that has not been placed into the budget, that's not been worked into the budget, and just vote on it immediately? That's just irresponsible. I'm not going to do that because you have to, yes, I want the taxes to be cut, but I don't want to ruin the state while we're doing it. We keep hearing the name of Sam Brownback resurrected from the dead, and that's the reason that he's been vilified is because they drop taxes too fast without figuring out how to fit it into the budget. And I'm not going to be responsible for that, because what will happen is we'll have to raise the tax later. So I didn't vote for that. The bill that finally got put in front of us that had come through the committee was gradually dropping the food sales tax to zero over, I think, it was 3 years. And it already dropped 2.5% here in January 1st. But what the Senate has passed out will accelerate that, so at the end, in 2024, the food sales tax will go to zero. And I apologize, I was like trying to read as much legislation as I could before I came in here, so I don't know when in 2024 it goes to zero. I don't know if it's the beginning or the end, but I'll get that in my newsletter and get it out to you as soon as I've had a chance to read the whole bill. They're also working on exempting Social Security from income tax, which I think is the second most progressive tax in the state of Kansas. I mean, you got people that are on a fixed income, and they've got skyrocketing property taxes. We don't need to be raising money off their backs with their Social Security check too. And so it is making its way through. It's one of the banner issues for the Republican caucus, and I can't imagine that the other side would be voting against it, because Governor Kelly has talked about doing it too. So I'm almost certain that we're going to get that done this year. But that's that's kind of the income tax side. On the property tax side, it's a little more challenging. As I said, as soon as we get this veterans property tax bill through, I'm going to go back and try to make it apply to all people 65 or older. But what we really need to do is fix the valuation. Who owns a house here? Right? Yeah, my house is. I've said it a bunch of times, but it's not any less true. My house went up 13% every year, and all I did was mow the lawn, and it's just crazy. I mean, it's like I'm not building onto my house, but it keeps going up in value. I live over in Kickapoo, right up 7th Street. The price that they've put on my house, I couldn't sell my house for that. If the county would come buy my house at that price, I'd sell tomorrow. Not really, because I don't want to move. But so what we got to do is fix the valuations. And the challenge is that property valuation is written into the Kansas Constitution. I don't know why, but it's written into the Kansas Constitution. There's a whole formula written into the Kansas Constitution for personal property tax. And it says, like one of the first lines, every property will be assessed equally, which means that if Riley builds big houses down on 20th and Eisenhower, which is great, we need more housing stock, and they cost like $350,000 to $500,000, we're all being judged based on that market rate, right? Because we all live in Leavenworth. If I can't write a bill that says when you buy your house, that's the cost of your house until you sell it, and you can't keep raising the value if you don't change your square footage. I can't do that, because then your valuation will be done differently than your valuation. So that is what we've got to fix. That requires a constitutional amendment. And if you remember from last year, constitutional amendments are very difficult to get passed. I remember people were coming to me during Value Them Both and during the debate on the regulation amendment and the sheriff's amendment, like, why can't you make this thing simpler? Well, we got to put on the ballot exactly what you're putting into the Constitution if you vote yes. And so it's going to be constitutional language. And that's why we have so much trouble. But that's where I want to go. I've got a lot of, when I'm going around and I'm talking about this other legislation with legislators, I'm also saying, hey, I'm working on this resolution to put a constitutional amendment on ballot. What do you think? I'm going around the building and I'm building support for it. And everybody likes the idea. It's just, it's in the sausage making, right? Well, we should also put this in it. Well, I'll support it if you do this. And so there's a lot of that goes on. And that's why it's not already out of the House. But that's what I'm working on, and I know it takes forever. It's very frustrating for me too. I'm one of those guys. I see where I want to go, and I just want to go there. But you just can't do that in the House. You got to bring 83 House members and 27 senators along with you, or you can't get it through, especially on controversial things. We can talk more tax at the end in questions if you want to talk about that, but I want to make sure that I hit elections, because there's a lot of stuff going on in elections, and I'm the chair of the elections committee, so I'm kind of neck deep in it. So I want to give you an update on where we're at on it. But if you want to go back and talk about taxes at the end, I can do that. So I am, in my first session or my first term in the legislature, I was on the elections committee. And I was on a lot of other committees, transportation, insurance, and pensions. And, those are important things. And I work hard on those committees. But elections really was my passion. And so when when I got reelected and they were figuring out what the leadership of the House was going to be, look like, and they asked me what I wanted to do, the first thing I said is, I want to be the chair of the elections committee, because I'm so passionate about it. And the reason I'm passionate about it is because, first of all, it's fundamental. It's fundamental to our way of life as Kansans and as Americans. And if we don't get that right, we're not going to have a country. You know, you look at what happened on January 6th with all the people that believed that the election had been stolen, how far they were willing to go because they did not believe that the results of the election reflected the will of the people. And wherever you fall on that, whether you believe they were right or you believe they were wrong, you have to be shocked and really struck to your core by just how fragile what we have is as a country. That just the suspicion that the results of the election don't reflect the will of people, what it did in our nation's capital and how close we came. That it shook me to my core too, I won't lie. On January 6th, just by sheer coincidence, I didn't even know that was the day that they were certifying the election. That shows how much I wasn't paying attention to it. But on January 6th, I had just been elected. I had not been sworn in yet, and I'd made an appointment with the Secretary of State's office to sit with the elections people and get the elections 101. Just get smart on elections. And when I walked out of the Secretary of State's office, it's in the southeast corner of the Capitol. When I walked out of the Secretary of State's office, there's all these people on the south lawn of our Capitol in Topeka. And, I walked up and I asked them what was going on. And, I think Chris Kobach was there, a couple other people were going on. And they were talking about election integrity. And they were upset because of some of the things that they believed had happened. And that's left an impression on me. And I took that into my first 2 years on the Elections Committee, and I definitely take that into being the chair of the Elections Committee. We have, since that day, since January 6, 2021, we have not been having a conversation as a country. We've got half the voters that are somewhere between, and there are some folks that are out there. I acknowledge that there are some folks that have some theories that I think are just not plausible. And we've heard some of them in the Elections Committee. But we also have people that have legitimate concerns, that there are vulnerabilities that we need to fix in our election system, things that we see happening in other states that are, even if you can't demonstrate that frauds happened, they are places where it is possible for fraud to occur. And then you've got the other side of the debate, which is just refuses to engage in the conversation. Anybody who does not accept that our elections have zero vulnerabilities and there's no way to make them tighter is a conspiracy theorist and a nut and a loon and a tinfoil hat wearing, pick your adjective. We've got to have a conversation, because if half the people are raising concerns, and even some of the people out here, the concerns begin with legitimate vulnerabilities in our system. Even the people, I agree that they add some therefores and therefores that I don't agree with, but they start with legitimate concerns. If we don't start having a conversation between the two sides where we start talking about how we're going to improve confidence so that the majority of folks, a super majority of folks believe that our elections are secure and that our elections reflect the will of the voters, this is going to continue to erode. Because we've been doing the other thing for 2 years. We've been doing the thing where one side calls the other side tinfoil hat wearing kooks, and it's just pouring gas in the fire. It's just making folks on that side of the debate less and less confident that anything's going to get fixed and less confident in our elections. So we've got to focus on this sweet spot of things where we can plug vulnerabilities, make people more confident that our elections are secure, and bring all those folks back across the line. And that's what I've been looking for, without unduly burdening voters. And we can have a conversation about where the line is. I acknowledge there are people that think, oh, you've gone too far here, or that's not far enough. We can have a conversation about where the line is, but we've got to have a conversation, because we haven't been having a conversation for the last 2+ years. And so that's what I'm trying to make happen in the Elections Committee, is the conversation. And we've had some ideas in there that I thought were good, And we've had some ideas in there that I thought weren't so good. We had, a legislator brought to us the idea of a runoff election. If one person in a statewide election doesn't get a majority, if they get less than 50%, we go to a runoff election. And so we heard that bill. And of course, everybody, screaming, it's the end of the republic. It's all gonna burn down. No, we're having a conversation. Maybe, let's hear the idea. Let's hear the folks who think it's a good idea. Let's hear the folks who don't think it's a good idea. Let's get legislative research to tell us how it works in other states. And then we'll make a decision about whether we want to move forward. And as a committee, we heard it and we discovered that it ain't ready for prime time. There's 2 states in the union that do it, and one of them's trying to stop. Georgia's trying to stop doing a runoff because they've discovered that it's not a very good idea. But we had the conversation. We had the conversation and we heard all the signs. And I try to run a pretty tight ship. I try to give everybody equal time. I try to, if the questions get too aggressive and we're no longer having a conversation, we're attacking the people, I try to shut it down. They're legislators, they represent their people, so they're gonna, it doesn't always work that way, but I'm trying to have a conversation about this stuff. We heard 2 Dropbox bills. One of them would have almost effectively banned Dropboxes because it would have made security measures on Dropboxes so onerous that most counties would be, I can't afford that. I think there's you could have 1 Dropbox in your county plus another Dropbox for every 30,000 people you had. Any Dropbox had to have a camera on it 24/7, and you had to be able to see the face of the person. And I understand why the proponents of that bill brought that bill. It's because they're concerned about the security of Dropboxes, and they're concerned that Dropboxes are not regulated at all, because they are not regulated at all. There's a 1977 law that has been interpreted to say you can have Dropboxes, and that's the sum and total of regulations on Dropboxes in the state of Kansas. We heard another bill that would have given the Secretary of State authority to regulate the Dropboxes. So now he's having a conversation with the county clerks and the elections commissioners that he appoints, and together they decide what should the rules be on Dropboxes, and they set those rules. So we heard both those bills, and the one that made it out of our committee was the second one, because folks realized, there were a lot of problems with just basically regulating Dropboxes out of existence. I understand the people that say Dropboxes are too big a vulnerability, we should get rid of Dropboxes. But like I said when we were talking about taxes, it's not up to me. It's up to 84 legislators in the House and 27 legislators in the Senate. That's what we've got to get. That's what we have to pass things by with Governor Kelly as the governor, or we have to bring in the Democrats as well. And so the bill that came out of the committee was the bill that would allow the Secretary of State to regulate Dropboxes, and it passed by 115 to, don't quote me, but it was almost unanimous in the House. There were some folks that felt that, we should be banning them, and they voted against it, but they're in the minority. And I'll tell you, they're in the minority even in the Republican Party. We had an election between Mike Brown, who wanted to ban Dropboxes, and Scott Schwab, who thought that Dropboxes were better than putting your ballot in the mail, because the mail might or might not come. And Scott Schwab won by double digits in a Republican primary. So even in the Republican Party, there's not an appetite for completely banning them. So we've got to work in the art of the possible. And again, I know it's frustrating. People are like, why don't you, why don't you, why don't you? We got to get 84 votes in the House, 27 votes in the Senate. So that's the bill that passed on Dropboxes. Another bill that we worked on was having ballots in by 7 p.m. on election night. And this is probably the most controversial thing that we passed out of the House committee. And I understand where folks are coming from on it. Some of the opponents came and said, well, the mail's gotten slower. That your ballot has to go to Kansas City and has to come back And, and somebody said, well, military voters are going to get disenfranchised. And so I'm going to explain to you why I voted the way I voted. I voted for the bill. I'll explain to you why I voted the way I voted, and we can have a conversation about it if you disagree. Or if you agree. Please, let's have a conversation if you agree. 31 states in the Union, almost a supermajority, your ballot has to be on an election night, period. That's 31 states out of 50, your ballot has to be in election night. And there's a handful that have a shorter grace period than Kansas, but 31 states. So I don't think their mail's faster than our mail. So a lot of those are less densely populated or less densely populated states like Kansas. Another thing that really compelled me is in the federal statute and in the state statute, military ballots have to be sent out 45 days in advance. And in the state statute and in the federal statute, military ballots have to be on election night. So this bill doesn't even affect military voters. Plus, military voters can fax their ballots in. Military voters can email their ballots in. And I voted from a lot of places. There's a lot of veterans here in this room that have voted from a lot of places that were not Kansas in Kansas, and our votes get counted. So that to me did not convince me not to vote for it. Another point is that this is how it used to be in Kansas until 2017. Right? It has not always been a 3-day grace period. It's been election day until 2017. And the guy who was advocating for it in 2017, our Attorney General Chris Kobach, he testified in the Senate in favor of going back to election night being election night. And so that was pretty convincing too. The guy who voted against it in the House was a Democrat when they went to the 3-day grace period. The guy who voted against it was Representative Carmichael from Sedgwick County, and he got up and testified. He got up in front of the House and pleaded with his colleagues to vote to go back to the way it used to be, election night being election night, and he voted with the Republicans on the bill. But I think that the thing that compels me the most, the reason that I think it's important, is what happened in 2020. Or 2022, I'm sorry. Because Veterans Day was on Friday, we didn't just keep taking ballots for 3 days. We kept taking ballots for a week. We didn't stop taking ballots until Monday because that wasn't a work day, right, and the way the law was written. So we kept taking ballots in Kansas for a week. And, we saw what happened in Maricopa County where they kept taking ballots for a month. And I watched the news. You watched the news. You heard what people were saying. And it doesn't matter if fraud was actually happening. It was eroding voter confidence that the results of the election were going to reflect the will of the voters. And I just told you that's why I'm doing everything that I'm doing in the Elections Committee. We've got to get those people back. And I agree that it does put a burden on voters. It does not put zero burden on voters doing away with the 3-day grace period. But I think that the cost of having to mail your ballot in 3 days early, or go to the polling place on election day and give it to them, or put it in a drop box by election night, or take it to the clerk by election night, I think that burden is worth the value of getting making more people confident that our elections reflect the will of the voters. Because if we don't get those folks back, if we continue to pour gas on the fire and don't and don't address this problem, we ain't gonna have a country. That's where we're headed. If we don't fix this problem, we ain't gonna have a country. So I want to talk very quickly, and we can go back and talk about this more, and I'm sure there'll be people with questions. But before I open it up, I want to talk really quick about the other thing that the Elections Committee oversees, which is the Ethics Commission, the Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission. There's a lot of stuff in the news, and I've actually got some emails from Republicans that are listening to what's going on in the news about what we're trying to do. And I want to clear the air, and I can answer questions about it if you want to talk about it more. There was a case down in Overland Park with this organization called Fresh Vision OP. And this is just a citizens group. It's not a big mega PAC. It's not attached to any candidate. It's just a group of citizens, many of them Democrats. The two people who came to testify before us, there was one Democrat and one unaffiliated, and their lawyers came advocating for this bill that I'm going to talk about. But the Governmental Ethics Commission, because our laws are very vague and open to interpretation, the current director is an activist, and he's been reinterpreting things that for a long time have been interpreted in a certain way. And as an example, this group, Fresh Vision OP, he decided they were a PAC because they had, in one of their mailings or emails, they had advocated that somebody be defeated in a local race. And so he went after these folks, and with these huge fines and these subpoenas, and just really trying to force them to register as a PAC and spend thousands of dollars in fines and do thousands of dollars of paperwork because he had decided they were a PAC. They fought him. And the Governmental Ethics Commission, they don't go through a court, right? There's 9 commissioners, and then there's a director, and they're basically a court. Independent from the courts, independent from the House, and the Senate, independent from the governor. They're their own little, and he called himself, in testimony, he called himself a law enforcement agency. And he doesn't answer to anybody, he doesn't answer the Attorney General. They're their own thing, right? Just 9 commissioners and the director. And they went after these folks for years. I mean, a year and a half. Cost them $22,000 in legal fees. And when it finally made it into a court, when they appealed, the judge found that there was no probable cause or reasonable suspicion, and they won the case. But then the commission went back to them, and in order to settle the case, because they knew they were going to lose the judge, they made them sign a paper that said they wouldn't sue the Governmental Ethics Commission to get their money back. And these folks were out of money. They had exhausted all their resources, so they had to sign. And these folks came to us with legislation that would restore some due process, insert a judge at a point in the process to make sure that they really they had reasonable suspicion, they had probable cause, and add specificity to definitions in the statute so that they couldn't be reinterpreted in ways that had never been interpreted before. Well, as you can imagine, the director of the commission, he screamed bloody murder, right? Because what we're doing is we're applying guardrails to an organization that had never had guardrails before. Said, we're trying to, because there's, they have other investigations. So he said, they're trying to, legislate themselves out of being investigated before we close the door and, put a bunch of people in jail. They're trying to this, they're trying to that. They're trying to make it legal for PACs and candidates to coordinate, just all this stuff. And he did it on Twitter. This guy did it on Twitter from the official Governmental Ethics Commission site, so that it looked like he was speaking for all the commissioners. And I know for a fact that 5 of the commissioners disagree with him and are looking for what we're trying to do. So he's not speaking for the whole commission, but that's what he did. Actually, 4 of the commissioners I know, not 5. But what am I trying to do and why? And it's not just me. It's I'm pushing the legislation that has been brought to us. It's not my bill, but I think they're right. The Governmental Ethics Commission regulates free speech. When you get right down to it, it's fundamental. The Governmental Ethics Commission, they regulate free speech. And why do I say that? Well, the Supreme Court has said that spending, that money spent for political ads and mailers and all those things is speech. It's speech. Also, they can compel speech. If they decide that you're a candidate committee or a political party or a political action committee, they make you put that paid for thing at the bottom. They're compelling you to say something, by statute. And so I'm not saying that that's inappropriate. I think that we do need to know where money comes from. I think that we do need to know who gave to Pat Proctor's campaign or Harry Schwartz's campaign or whoever's campaign. I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have paid for attribution on our mailers. We passed out of my committee this year a bill that makes even more people put paid for attributions, like people that are advocating for constitutional amendments, for and against constitutional amendments. So we're not getting those texts anymore from anonymous sources. It happened to me on election night. It happened during Value Them Both on both sides. So I'm not saying that there's not a place for it. I'm just saying that is so fun. That's a fundamental right. Free speech is a fundamental right. And if you're going to have an organization that is regulating a fundamental right, they need to have some checks and balances. They need to have some oversight. They need to have, and this idea, because I've been getting asked questions by Kansas City Star and all these people, like, isn't it inappropriate to be looking at ethics when there's an investigation going on? Well, first of all, this isn't retroactive, so it has nothing to do with the investigations they're doing. But second of all, there's never a bad time to be asking yourself, are we infringing on people's rights? Are people getting due process? So I reject that. But anyways, what we're actually doing, and I'll shut up and let you ask any questions you'd like to ask, but what we're actually doing is making the director of the Ethics Commission go to a judge to get subpoenas. Making him go to a judge and prove that he has a reasonable suspicion or a probable cause to be issuing subpoenas. That's the most dramatic thing that we're doing. The second thing that we're doing is right now, the criminal part of the ethics statute has a statute of limitations, but he has said in testimony, I have no statute of limitations. So he could go back 20 years and find some guy who was a treasurer for the Republican Party 20 years ago and go after him. So we're making the statute of limitations 5 years so that it matches the criminal statute of limitations. And then we're adding definitions. What is a PAC? What is an agent? What is just basically so that it can't be reinterpreted in a way that it's never been interpreted before. And so we're nowhere near bringing it to the floor of the House. We've got some more work to do. But right now, we're talking with the other side because they're fed up with it too, and they think that there's need for more controls. And so this thing might accidentally come out as 100 to something vote. So that's what we're trying to do. We don't want this to just be Republicans ramming through legislation. We're talking to the other side. And we're trying to get it through. I'm going to stop there. I've talked too much. I plan to finish about 5 minutes earlier and answer any questions you have.
I have a real concern. You're telling me that you are in support of getting rid of the food tax. But now there's another bill that wants to charge income tax at 4.25%.
Yeah. So there's a bill that's making its way through the Senate. I haven't even seen it yet, but there's a bill that's making its way through the Senate that has a flat tax. What the advocates of it are saying is the way that it's written, it will eliminate the lowest bracket so that the lowest bracket won't be paying taxes. And so basically everybody's taxes go down. But I haven't seen the thing. So I haven't said that's what I want to do because I haven't even seen the bill yet. So I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea. I need to see the bill. And I think it just came out of the Senate yesterday. And so we're going to get it next week, and I'm going to start wading through it.
It's certainly, I'll give to you, but I'll take it away somewhere else. I think it really has a...
Yeah, and I'll just tell you, you guys heard me on the campaign. I'm not raising anybody's taxes. I'm just not. I am not raising anybody's taxes. And if they put a bill in front of me that raises taxes, I'm not voting for it. Because we're, in the midst of the worst inflation that we've had in 40 years. And, I know, what do they say on TV now? It's like 6% or something. I buy eggs. I buy more eggs than anybody in this room, okay? It's a lot more than 8% or 6%. You know, I buy a lot more shrimp and chicken and beef and pork than anybody in this room for the restaurant. It's the inflation is a lot higher than 6%. And so I'm just not raising any taxes. I'm just not. Now, I don't want to irresponsibly cut taxes so that I got to come back and raise them later. But, you know, so I think that there's room to give taxpayers relief and do it in a responsible way. And that's what I'm going to be trying to do. But I haven't seen that specific bill. I think it got amended on the floor. So even the one that I looked at has changed. So I'll be looking at it next week. Any other questions?
I have another one.
Okay.
Can you please work on getting the ad valorem taxes back
Yeah.
to the counties?
Yeah.
That would really help with the property tax.
You're not going to like my answer to this, Jeanette, but so I've heard the county commissioners say that, well, the reason that our property taxes are going up is because we're not getting this local ad valorem tax relief that is in statute. Well, that was put in statute almost 20 years ago, and it was paid 1 year.
Yeah.
In that time, our property taxes have gone up way more than that amount of money that we're not getting from the state. So the idea that the reason they keep having to raise our taxes is because we're not getting that ad valorem tax or that LABTR back, that just is not plausible. I've only heard one person in the 3 years that I've been in the House. That's my third year. I've completed my third year. But in all the 3 sessions I've been in the House, I've only heard one member of either party ever mention LABTR, and he got a history lesson from the appropriations on how that bill, when it was passed, was just not feasible. They did it thinking it was going to help. They tried it for 1 year, and it almost broke the budget. And so that's why every year they pass a proviso to not do it. I think that a better solution is to fix our valuations. If we want to give everybody property tax relief, we fix the valuation. So when you buy your house, that's the price of your house. Maybe we add like it goes up 3% or 2% or something like that, but that's the value of your house. When you sell it, or when you change the square footage, then the property assessor can come and he can, get out his pencil and he can change the value. Or, if it's sold, whatever that price is, that's the value of the house now. Because it's just not sustainable. I talked to so many seniors that are paying more now in property taxes than they used to pay for their house payment when they were still paying on their mortgage. We are pricing people out of our state. Same thing with the veterans tax and a lot of other things. So we are pricing people out of our state. And we're losing people. We're one of the top 5 states in the union to move out of. And that's going to have real consequences here over time. We almost lost a congressperson this time. And if we continue to remain flat while all the other states grow, in 10 years, we're going to lose a congressperson. That's one voice in Washington that we don't have anymore. And so, one vote in the Electoral College that we don't have anymore for president. And so we're on a timeline here. We got like nine years and change to fix this problem, or we're in trouble. Yes, sir.
Two questions. How do the members of that ethics?
You only get one question. No, I'm just kidding. How do the members? Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
How do the members of that ethics commission, how do they obtain their seats?
Yeah, so there's a big formula. The majority leader gets to appoint somebody, the Senate president gets to appoint somebody, the governor gets to appoint somebody. I mean, it's like that's how it's done, though. It's appointed positions. But what's frustrating about it is the qualifications, and this is one of the things that this bill that we're working on reforms. The rules for what qualifies you to be a commissioner almost guarantees that you know nothing about elections. You can't have been in a campaign. You can't have ever been a treasurer. There's like a multi-year ban on having been a candidate that makes you basically out of date when you get there. What we need is people who have been have been in the process and understand how the process works. Because what happens now is we get people that don't know anything about elections, and the director, who's a lawyer now, he wasn't a lawyer before, he let his license lapse, but he's a lawyer, and he's an expert on the laws. And so he's telling them things, and they basically just become a rubber stamp because they don't even understand what he's talking about. And so that we need commissioners that have some experience with elections. There was a mistake in the bill, and it got all blown up, but it's already been fixed before it came out of committee. When we deleted all the qualifications and rewrote qualifications, we accidentally removed the part that said that only 5 of the 9 can be from one party. And everybody's like, aha, they're trying to stack it with... We fixed that. Only 5 people can be from one party. So even if we have a supermajority in the legislature, it's a narrow majority in that commission because we don't want it to be partisan. We want it needs to be nonpartisan.
On the election
Yes, sir.
question, what has been done to improve the integrity of one vote per voter?
Yeah. So people get mad when I say this, so I apologize if I'm going to make you mad. We have a really secure election system. The America First Institute says that Kansas is one of the top 8 states in the union for election security based on our laws and our procedures. We actually did I did a field trip I took the committee to the Shawnee County Elections Commission office, and they took us soup to nuts through how Shawnee County runs elections. And there is, I am convinced that the procedures for once the voter, like when a voter walks into the polling place, the procedures that we have are really, really good to make sure that you don't go to like 3 polling places. What I have concerns about, and I can't, we don't know if it's happened or not because, if it had happened, it'd blow up. If we caught it happening, it'd blow up. But what I'm concerned about is there are a ton of voters on our voter roll that don't live where the voter roll says they live. And you've knocked doors with me. You know what I'm talking about. But if you've ever knocked doors for a candidate, you take the voter registration list and you go to a door and there's the 2 people who live there, the 2 people who lived there before them, and the 2 people who lived there before them, and they're all registered at that address. And you remember when we, in COVID, in 2020 election, we sent ballot requests to everybody who was registered, right? So that house got 6 ballot requests for 2 voters. Now, there are safeguards. You have to put your state ID number on there and you have to sign it. And at the elections office, they have to verify that your signature matches the signature on your state ID. So there are some safeguards there, but we had more mail-in voting than we've ever had before. And we don't have an automated system here in Leavenworth. A lot of the smaller counties don't have an automated system. So it's basically just somebody going like that, trying to decide if the signatures match. So I think that the best way to get at what you're saying, which is only voters who are valid, living humans who are eligible to vote are voting in our elections. A big piece of that is cleaning up the voter rolls. Something that we did last year, I actually sponsored, carried, and passed this bill. Something we did last year is if you have no election activity at all for 4 years, you haven't signed a ballot petition, you haven't registered to vote, you haven't asked for a ballot, you haven't voted, and there's a couple other things. If you haven't done anything that connect you in any way with the elections office for 4 years, they're allowed to send you a notice to see if you still live there. If that notice doesn't come back, or if it comes back undeliverable, it starts a clock, another 4 years. I know that's a long time, but we're working inside federal law that makes like strict reasons that you can remove somebody from the voter rolls. I think it's 8 years is excessive, but that's what we could get past 84 votes. It starts the clock with another 4 years. And if there's still no election activity for 4 more years, then they can take you off the rolls. And if you show up on that last election and like, hey, why'd you take me off the rolls? You're going to get a provisional ballot. And if you were a legitimate voter, the Board of Canvassers can count your vote. So, it's pretty, I think that's, conservative is the wrong word. That's pretty cautious. For 8 years of no activity, plus we tried to verify you lived there and nothing came back, I think that's reasonable. We can disagree, but I think that's reasonable. And yes, the thing that you always hear in the elections committee is, well, prove that frauds happen. Well, if there's a vulnerability and we can plug it, why do we wait until it's exploited and our elections are undermined before we decide to fix it? This is a vulnerability. There are 6 people registered at a house that only has 2 humans in it, and those other 4 people verifiably do not live there. Let's take them off the voter roll.
I don't like drop boxes, and I don't like the late, voting, 3 days and stuff like that. But I do have a limited time to go and vote, and so I don't like to stand in line. Is there still going to be the early voting available to go down to the?
We have not touched early voting. I early vote because I'm always busy on election day getting people to the polls. So I early vote. There is no change to when mail-in ballots go out. There's no change to when early voting can begin in the county. No change at all to any of that stuff. All we're doing is on the back end, if you got a mail-in ballot, your mail-in ballot has to be in by 7 p.m. on election night. And, it has to be in a valid election ballot, container, right? So it doesn't have to be in the clerk's hand at 7 p.m. on election night. It has to be in a drop box, or it has to be in a ballot box, or it has to be in the clerk's hand by 7 p.m. So, because that was a concern. We actually, to address people's concerns, we amended the bill to make that clear that, because if you come here to the library to vote and you drop your ballot in the box before 7 p.m., it's not going to be at the clerk's office by 7 p.m. It's going to be in that ballot box until it gets taken in. So we've amended it to make sure that that's the case. And that was actually my ranking minority member made that amendment, and it was unanimously voted. So, is there any other questions? Okay, last question, then we'll get to eating donuts.
A couple of things that seem like have had negative effects on elections have been ranked choice voting and open primaries. And I've seen those in other states. Has there been any consideration?
So when we opened the runoff election can of worms, we had a bunch of people come in and testify about the glories of ranked choice voting. Well, if it weren't for ranked choice voting in Alaska, Sarah Palin would be a congresswoman right now. And some people in this room might think that's a good result, but I think if I were a voter and my second choice became congresswoman, I wouldn't feel like my will had been reflected in the election. So that's not coming to Kansas. There's zero appetite for it. Even the Democrats, I believe, and I could be, please correct me if you're a Democrat and I'm lying, but I think they've tried ranked choice voting in the state and have abandoned it. They tried it and didn't like it either. So it's not coming to the state. And what was the other one? Open primaries, yeah. So actually something that we're doing that's sort of related to it is we're not doing open primaries. Okay, so that's not happening. The candidate of a party should be picked by the party, and then they compete against the other party. That's eminently common sense in my mind, and I don't think there's any appetite for anything else. A couple things one thing that we've done, and one thing that we're talking about, we've got a bill that's in the pipeline. It came from the Senate. It didn't come from us. But to raise the threshold for write-in candidate, basically a write-in candidate has to register. If they want to be a write-in candidate, they have to just throw their name in the hat as a write-in candidate at whatever level they're at. Because what happens is you have like 10 people and they all make themselves write-in candidates, and it makes it take forever to do the ballot counting. I'm not sure where I'm at on it. I know it came out of the Senate, but we're going to have a hearing on the bill, and God's honest truth, I don't know where I'm at on it. But something else that I am an advocate of this, it didn't come through this year. I'm going to try to do it next year because we just ran out of time in the committee. I didn't even get the bill filed. We have the lowest threshold in like the entire region, and one of the lowest thresholds in the United States for becoming an independent candidate in terms of the number of signatures you have to have. And so that's why we keep getting governors elected with less than 50% of the vote, because it's so easy to get on the statewide ballot in the state that, you know, we have all these spoiler candidates. Like, you know, Dennis Pyle this last time, 5,000 signatures. You only got to get 5,000 people in a state of 3 million people to sign onto a petition for you to be on a ballot. And it's happened on the other side too, you know, because the Republicans have been guilty of throwing in a spoiler too. That's the lowest threshold in the entire Great Plains. I mean, it's just really ridiculous. You know, some places have as high as like 1%, 2% of the electorate. I don't know if that's the right number. I don't know what the right number is, but I know it's a lot more than 5,000 for a statewide candidate. And so we're not going to get it done this year, but we're going to be looking at that for next year. Okay, I'm going to stop here so that everybody can eat these donuts so I don't have to eat them. I'm going to be hanging out, so if you want to talk to me about anything that you didn't get a chance to ask a question about, please do. But thank you so much for coming and spending your Saturday with me. I appreciate it. Thank you.